we return to the Persian Empire. After at least a year in captivity, a young Jewish woman named Hadassah has risen to the place of queen against all odds. Her cousin, who adopted her as his daughter after her parents' early deaths, has cautioned her that her Jewish identity may put her at greater risk in the palace. So Hadassah hides her heritage and her family from her husband, the King Xerxes, even going so far as to change her name to fit in among the Persians, and so she wears the crown as Queen Esther. The text doesn't tell us exactly how much time passes, but with context clues we can see that what comes next is anywhere from 1 to 6 years after Esther was taken from her home. And still, we find Mordecai exactly where we left him, once again at the threshold of the king's gate, as close as he can get to Esther to learn how he fares. No matter how many years have passed, that's still his little girl, faithfully continuing to love his daughter, even after she has been taken from him. And we come to the second of 3 crucial moments that occur on the king's threshold in the book of Esther. Because as he sits and waits for news of Esther, Mordecai overhears the guards at the doorway in a secret conversation. Bigthana and Teresh are angry with the king. We don't know why, but the text has already given us many reasons a subject may object to the rule of Xerxes. Take your pick. Is it his arrogance, his drunkenness, his foolishness, how easily he has manipulated his indulgence, the fact that he kidnaps countless women for fun? There are lots of reasons to believe that Xerxes is a bad leader. He's practically a caricature of all of the things that make a bad leader rolled up into one. So Mordecai hears these 2 guards venting their complaints about the king, and I can't imagine that he disagrees with their grievances, because our text shows us that Mordecai is a man who acts with wisdom. He is a man of discernment. He is capable of recognizing the foolishness of the king when he sees it. And we also know that he has been personally wounded by Xerxes, and his family has been, when Esther was kidnapped. But then as he's listening to this conversation, it takes a darker turn. The guards move from venting about the king to actively planning to assassinate the man. What kind of assassin plans to target a king in the same king's own gate, where they may be overheard? It seems Xerxes is not the only incompetent person in this book that we find. So Mordecai, the man who we know goes to this gate regularly, predictably overhears them plotting. The text tells us this scene in a few short verses with very little description, but even still, it is a perfectly cinematic moment. Complete with heavy-handed symbolism, Mordecai is at a literal threshold and has a major decision to make. After the insult and injury caused by Xerxes to him and his family, how easy would it be to walk away? To pretend he heard nothing, to shrug and say, "This is not my problem. In fact, this may be a solution to my problem." The king has brought great injury to Mordecai and his people, and now Mordecai has a chance to hope to see the reign of Xerxes come to an early end simply by doing nothing. The text does not tell us what motivates Mordecai's next move. It may very well be that his conscience demands that he cannot allow any violence, even against an evil king. And just reading this chapter, I might actually think that is the case. But spoiler alert, if we read the end of this story, we will see that Mordecai is not a pacifist when it comes to enemies of his people. So it doesn't seem that he is playing the part of the Good Samaritan and loving his enemies here. I suspect that Mordecai is demonstrating a different fruit of the Spirit for us: self-control, restraint. Mordecai has every reason to hate Xerxes and wish ill upon him. And Mordecai is a man of discernment who takes the time to think about his actions. His little girl has a crown on her head, and her fate is now tied to the fate of Xerxes. People who overthrow kings don't usually let the queen go on to live her life freely. So Mordecai chooses to act for the benefit of a man who has injured him and his family, to whom he owes no goodwill, to keep his little girl safe. And he also seizes an opportunity that he finds here to increase the king's goodwill towards Esther and improve her chances of safety in the palace, because he doesn't just report this himself. He sends a message to Esther. And she, following the wisdom of Mordecai as she has throughout this book so far, takes that information to the king. And we see in this moment that Esther has learned and gained a few of the characteristics of the man who raised her, because just as Mordecai protects Esther, she looks for opportunities to increase his chances of safety, and so she makes sure to give Mordecai credit for this find. The king does the first thing even close to a wise decision in this entire book. He actually listens to the voice of wisdom speaking to him, and he also takes the trouble to investigate this claim. The investigation shows the truthfulness of Esther and Mordecai's finds. And so these guards are executed. And the king finds the episode noteworthy enough to have it recorded by a scribe in his presence. There is one more major player to meet in the book of Esther. And now we encounter him in the beginning of chapter 3, just after we have read of Mordecai and Esther thwarting an assassination attempt against Xerxes. If you'd like to follow along, I'll be reading from Esther chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor, higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down to pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. And now, my friends, we meet the true villain of this story. Xerxes is a terrible king, to be sure, but here in this moment is the greatest threat to Esther, Mordecai, and their people. A man in power with a fragile ego that he lets rule his entire life. I don't think it's an accident that our author gave us Mordecai's story right before this one. Because while Mordecai exercises self-control and restraint when given an opportunity to passively take vengeance on a person who has truly wronged him and his family in the worst of ways, Haman behaves rashly. He takes incredible, excessive offense to the fact that one single person does not kneel down in his presence. His anger at such a small offense rises to the point of absurdity. Excess and restraint are themes we have already seen clearly throughout this story. And now, just as we saw in Xerxes, an excess of consumption, of lust, of arrogance, we see in Haman an extreme excess of wrath. Not only does he become violent when he learns that Mordecai will not kneel to him, he becomes genocidal, wanting to destroy an entire group of people over one small offense from a single person that has wounded his pride. We continue this story in verse 7. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pur, that is the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Sit with that for just a moment. He essentially rolls dice. He's making a game of genocide, using gambling tools to decide when he's going to kill an entire group of people. It's horrific. It's very clear that Haman holds no value for human life that is not directly valuable in his eyes. Continuing in verse 8, then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury." So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people as you please." Once again, we see Xerxes behaving more like a puppet than a king, guided by the whims of whichever advisor has his favor on that particular day. Haman has suggested slaughtering an entire group of people, and without asking a single question, Xerxes just says, "Do as you please." He doesn't even ask, which people are you talking about? What makes them different? There are a few lessons that we can learn from Haman here. One is in the dangers of wrath. Wrath is a sin. It causes great damage to our world from anyone. It is deadly when it is wielded by people in positions of power, and it destroys our world and the people in it. We also find in this text one of the most insidious tools of violence and oppression that has been used for hundreds of years to slaughter millions of people and continues to be used today. In this text, we clearly see the dangers of weaponized fear. Notice how Haman approaches this. Now, genocide, murder, is wrong, regardless of the motive. But notice that Haman lies about his motive. We know that he wants to kill this entire group of people because one of them hurt his feelings. But that's not what he tells the king. He doesn't say, "My pride was wounded because one person didn't kneel down. Let me kill all of his people." He says something different. Did you catch it? He says these people are dispersed throughout the land. They're everywhere. They keep themselves apart. They're different from us. They break the king's laws. Where have you heard this before? How many times in history has a group been designated as other, marked as different. And then their difference and misunderstanding about those differences is used to incite fear and label them as criminals and as a threat to society, just because they're different. This is how genocides and tragedies happen. Wicked people in power have used this same tool throughout history to wound whole groups of people because of their religion, or the color of their skin, or their gender, or their sexuality, or the place where they were born, or the language they speak. This is a grave sin. It is an affront to God. It dehumanizes and kills children who were made in God's image. I'm aware that I'm not telling you guys anything new here. You all know this, but it bears repeating because this is still a tool used today by the wicked to oppress and kill the people they hate. It has been used for centuries, and it is absolutely used today. By reminding ourselves of the tactics of evil to bring about tragedy, we can learn to see these schemes when they appear in our own world and inoculate ourselves against such vicious lies so that we never believe them and never take part in their viciousness and violence. This type of rhetoric inspires fear and hatred of God's children. It does so on the basis of the very diversity that God has gifted us with, by trying to convince us that the diversity of humanity is a curse and a threat, instead of a gift and an opportunity to work together in pursuit of the heart of the divine. My friends, humanity was made in the image of God, and it takes all of us, all types of us, to reflect that image, because God is bigger than any one of us, than any one sort of us, than any one gender or nation or culture. The Hamans of the world will try to convince us to forge a God made in our own image, so that we can be convinced to hate our siblings and deny that they are image bearers too. And if we let this go unchallenged in our world, it will kill our neighbors, the neighbors that we are called to love and look out for, the neighbors who are also children of God just as we are. Our text for this week ends in a very sad place. In the remaining verses of chapter 3, we see the beginnings of the fallout of Haman's wrath and the king's complicity in it. They summon in royal secretaries and send out an order that they have translated to every language in the empire to give Haman's order that on the 13th day of the month of Adar, the Jewish people are to be annihilated. Haman orders in the king's name that every Jewish person, man, woman, and child, is to be murdered and their goods plundered, and they make it the law. The final sentence of Esther chapter 3 reads, "The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered." What a pathetic and wicked excuse for leadership. They sit and drink as the city they are meant to lead is thrown into chaos and confusion by a senseless order that they have issued for needless violence against innocent people. And so we continue in the book of Esther to see that this nation is ruled by people completely lacking in self-control and wisdom, and we see the dangers that brings. They indulge themselves at every opportunity, whether it is their love of wine or their wrath. They are happy to watch a genocide unfold because one person refused to kneel. For a moment, it seems hopeless. How How can ordinary people hope to stand against such evil when it seemingly rules the world? But as the author of Esther so quietly shows us, God is present even when God is out of sight. There are heroes in this book. We have met them. God has brought them to places where they now have opportunities to gain the ear of the king. And the man and woman who had the discernment to practice the restraint, to let go of their own justified wrath against Xerxes, will also have the wisdom and self-mastery to exercise courage to resist even this great evil. But that's next week's story. For now, we are left to sit in the darkness of this text for a moment, to bear witness to wrath, prejudice, and violence, to see the havoc that they threaten to bring in this story and by extension in our own world today, to call them what they are: sin. This text invites us to recognize the lies of fearmongers and reject the path of violence that they try to lead us down. Fear is a powerful tool of the wicked, but there are more powerful forces in our world than fear. And by participating in those forces, we can be a part of the solution, overcoming fear and hatred and violence. Because the scriptures tell us that love casts out fear, that the darkness does not overcome the light that shines in it. And we are called to be the people of love. We must start by casting out the fear and hatred in our own hearts, so that we may do so in our communities and our world. If you would like to join us on the path of overcoming fear and hatred with love, come forward now as we sing.